are here at the home of Jim and Yvonne Neirhake in Martinez, California. And this is Jane Moore, and I'm Kathy Pardick. And our camera person is Brett Stevenson, and Rye Moore is here with us. So let's get started. You filled out a questionnaire with some background information, and we want to go over those questions again so that we can
That's
get
fine.
them on tape. So tell me where you were born and when you were born, Jim.
I was born in 1937 at the Martinez Community Hospital, and I believe my doctor was Dr. Edmeades.
What was the last name for the doctor?
Dr. Edmeades?
Edmeades.
Yeah.
Okay. Who was the first member of your family to move into this area?
My father. No, I can't really say because my mother too. So I don't remember when they came.
Your father was about 8 or 9?
Huh?
How old was your father when he came from Holland?
I don't know. I don't remember. All I remember is that he came. He was probably in equivalent to the 8th grade when because they came and they settled in Oakley, and my grandfather had bought land that was a almond orchard, and my dad talked about walking to school, and that was the Live Oak School in Oakley, and so he went as far as the 8th grade there. My folks, my mother, they came from. My mother was, I think, born in Alameda, and my grandparents lived in Mountain View. That's a little outline of Martinez. And my grandfather was a fire chief, and Ruth Newman will be able to give you a lot of information about that.
Okay.
And how my dad and mother met was when finally my grandfather was an engineer on a ship, and he yearned to go back to the sea. So they walked off the land in Oakley and came to Martinez because there was a lot of Dutch families living here. So they got a house on D Street, and at some point in time they were they had a bakery, and so they would deliver baked goods to the Shell refinery, and they had a Model A panel, and in some place I have a picture of it. I haven't been able to find it, but they would load up the baking goods in the Model A, and then he would go to Shell, and somehow my mother and father met, and then my mother would go on his deliveries around Shell, and my grandmother was a housekeeper for a gentleman that was a scientist at Shell, and they had a little girl, and so my mother had to take care of the little girl. So that's how they met.
What proximity did the proximity of the creek play a role in choosing to live here?
Did what?
Did the being near the creek play a role in their decision to move to this property?
No,
Live on the creek?
No, it just what happened was our neighbor Mac McKay. He was an engineer for the county, and he surveyed this property for I would say the Muir family or the Strentzel family or whatever, and so he subdivided this land, and it's called Sheridan Lane, and that's part of the Hanna family name or something. But anyway, he surveyed the land, and so I guess my dad and the Neirhakes and the McKays were friends. So Mac invited my mom and dad to come out here and see if they'd like to live here, because there was his property, which is now the Poppy property, and then this piece. And so my folks bought it for $350. And at first, my mother says, "Where's the store at?" And my dad was working for the county, and so he said, "Well, you just make up the list, and I'll bring it home." And at that time, I think we had an old '37 Chevy, 4-door, because I have a picture of it. But then later on, I don't know how later on, the Newmans bought next door. And they're related to my folks, or me.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the work that your father did? You mentioned he worked for the county.
What he worked for the county? Mm-hmm. My dad was, he worked for the county. He started out really drawing maps, and he was real good at lettering. And that's, I think, his first job. And then he ended up being a head draftman in the assessor's office, and he ran that part of the office. And then when I was 10 years old, he to become a land surveyor, he took a correspondence course. That's how he learned to be and then he worked for a gentleman named Dunk Dunkley, and he worked for the county, and when they would go out together, and that's how my dad learned. And then he became a land surveyor, and then I started going out when I was 10 years old. He probably grabbed me by the ear and told me to go to work, but it didn't hurt me, so I got all over the county way before all the malls and stuff. What?
The book system.
Yeah, let's see, the Contra Costa County had no map system, and so my dad started that. They would just have pieces of paper and throw them in a box, and then probably somebody had to rumble through them to get the information. But by going out when I was young, I really got to see a lot of the county. I got to see the land that Sun Valley sits on. Before it was Sun Valley, it was just a farmland. And Highway 4 was just a little tiny road. Now it's a freeway. And ships really used to go to Pacheco.
Ships went to Pacheco?
Yeah. The Pacheco Creek was wide enough. Over there behind in front of Kmart, there used to be a big concrete or steel bar in the middle of the channel, and the sailing ships would come up the channel, and then they would tie onto that, and the wind would move them around, so they would be heading out again. So yeah, but what happened? Why Pacheco Creek disappeared was years ago they used to just do everything with horses, and as soon as they started doing things with tractors, then the ground, everything silted in, because more dirt started to move and flooding came, and that's how the creeks got flooded. Filled in.
What was the purpose of the ships coming to Pacheco? What was the?
There was a big port there, a wharf behind Paul Martinez's barn. Well, Paul Martinez was a person that they shipped grain and stuff out. And he had tractors and farm equipment. I remember I went in a building there that had buggies in it. One room I went in, and I saw the hand crank telephones, whole room of them. He was my kind of guy.
So this was.
He was the first junk dealer.
Can you tell us just a few more impressions about what Contra Costa County looked at this time when you began surveying with your father? You mentioned Pacheco Creek. And
well, gas was probably 10 cents a gallon.
Tell them about how they used to Pacheco, the mall, how they used to pay for the farmers. Your father would survey them.
Oh, before Sun Valley Mall, the Bartlett people owned the land, and then they would. The Japanese farmers would rent the property, and then we would survey the crops, and then that's how they paid for the rent of the land. They didn't pay for the roadways, and we did a lot of that. So they would put they would plant the crops, and then we'd go out and survey the boundaries of them, and that's how they paid their rent.
By how big the farm?
How big of the farm was, or the plots of the vegetables or whatever. Yeah.
So they paid per size of their farm.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like Japanese farmers.
Yeah.
Were there any other areas that are different now geographically in the county that come to mind that were, back when you were surveying? What are some-
Los Vaqueros.
Los Vaqueros?
You used to survey the property.
Yeah. We surveyed the Ordway Ranch before it was the Los Vaqueros dam. Yeah, we surveyed the Ordway Ranch.
Ordway?
Ordway, yeah.
How big was it?
About 18,000 acres.
Wow.
We surveyed the Pereira ranches out in Briones, the Pereira ranches in Brentwood. Where else? We surveyed up in the hills of Pittsburgh, where the cemetery is, and the Black Diamond mines. We surveyed for the Abram brothers, and they owned the land along Buchanan Road in Pittsburgh.
What was Alhambra Creek like when you were growing up?
It was, when I was real young, I don't really remember. And we probably played in it a lot. And it was clean. And it was a good place to play. We played in the creek. We played in the hills. In February, we went up on the Ammon Hill and went swimming in February. So there was plenty of things to do. It was just clean. We never saw any fish in it. If they were there, I never saw them. We didn't care. And then in the winters, they were real harsh. And some winters, when one time we got an old boat and tied it to the bridge when the creek would be about 3 feet high, and we'd climb in that thing and shoot the rapids.
Where was the bridge that you tied off to?
In the back of my property
Right here on your property.
Not on mine, but it went across the creek. It's on Bill Stone's property, but it's a different bridge.
So you just sit in the boat and the kids would kick you around?
Hold on.
How old were you then?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Sometime or another.
Teenager or?
Probably a teenager, yeah.
The guy who did the dam one time, you guys ended up having all the water here.
Well, that was in 1956. When 1956, the Coakley's, I believe it was a Coakley's dam, the wood hadn't been pulled out, and the water came down the creek, and I showed you on top of my stairs where the water ended up. In 11 seconds, the water come down the creek, raised the creek, and it went down again. It had nothing to do with the water downstream. It was just water that came down quick, went up quick, and then went left quick.
People used to use the creek for irrigating. People use the creek for irrigating.
That's right. We should start there. As I remember right, years ago, the water came out of the Ammon Hills. And Joe Figueredo would turn the water so that it would irrigate the fields, because we had pears here, a lot of pears. And so when they built the road out here, the Sheridan Lane, Mac McKay worked for the county, and they put culverts underneath the road so the water would go from one orchard to another. So the water would come down by the cemetery, and then it would go into the Lapham's land, and then it would go to Mac McKay's property, and then afterwards it would go to the creek. And then the other culvert took it into the Gilbert orchard, and the water would die someplace out in the Gilbert orchard. But then when the subdivision came, then the water, what happened, the water was not going directly to the creek. Other people would divert it There used to be a bridge over by the cemetery, and the water used to go down towards the bridge. Well, then somebody started damming it up and making little levees and diverting it other ways. So all of a sudden, now we're getting water down here. Before, we hardly got any water. It was never noticeable. So this probably started, my wife and I have been married 44 years, and so probably 44 years ago is when it really started to start. You know, it started because people were moving into the neighborhood, and they come from the city and they want to live in the county, but they want the country, but they want to have their city things. So they start diverting the water, and so instead of the water going into the field, into the orchards, all of a sudden it was coming down Sheridan Lane. And there's a culvert up there by Dave Poppy's corner, but if it didn't handle all the water, then it went to the next culvert, and then if that didn't handle, then it came down our driveway. So most of all, the people never knew what was happening down at this end. And one year we went out to my friends in Clayton for a New Year's Eve party. We came home, dropped my mother off, and about 5 o'clock the water was coming through the front door. And the dog was laying in the water. So then after that, every year we sandbag out front. And at first we started with maybe 2 feet of sandbags in front of the front door. And then pretty soon we started going from the edge of the road down to the edge of the house with sandbags. And then sandbag across the front of the house to keep it out of the house. And a couple of years we sandbagged it. Yvonne and I would get the sandbags and we'd throw the dirt in the back of my pickup, and we'd start in November. Whether it rained or not, we didn't care. We were going to get the sandbags up. And then Shell Oil would come and pick them up later after the season was over with. And then many times, many times they had piles of sand around the town, and we'd go and take the sandbags and do it that way too. So, you know, they talked about fixing the ditch, and it was always talk. And then Kit Greerty, she loved her lots, but anyway, she started generating talk, and people came, and we talked.
Jamie too.
No, wait a minute, before Jamie, and they talked, and all of a sudden things were starting to come into picture, and then pretty soon Jamie came on the scene. She moved in. And then all of a sudden, the pipe became a reality. First, they talked about putting an open ditch. No, that wouldn't work. And then finally, they settled with a 42-inch pipe into a 52-inch pipe. And so, we're supposed to be worried about the water that goes in the creek, because now it's going in the creek above us, but we don't even see it. I mean, that 52-inch pipe will never fill up. I mean, it could, but I doubt if it ever will. But still, that's a lot of volume of water. But we don't race down to the back of the property and watch it go by. We could care less.
As long as it's not coming in your front door, you're happy.
Yeah. I mean, we told a lot of stories about the water coming down here, and then it went in the swimming pool, and then now. And then that was a big thing, because we had to wait. You had to wait until the rain stopped and the creek stopped, and then we'd empty the water out of the swimming pool, and then there would be about 1.5 feet of silt in there, and then we'd take and bucket it out, and then let it dry out on the outside, and then pick it up, and then water blast it. And so, yeah, it was a big job. And the other thing too is that when it flooded up at the corner by Greerty's and Poppy's, the county would come out, and there would be 6 inches of mud up there, and they'd send a crew out there to clean that up. And that went on for years. And then finally the pipe came. Now no more of that. So the county comes out and checks other things, but they don't have to come out and take care of the mud. One time I was smart. Drove my 40 Ford pickup, out of here, and there was 6 inches of mud on the road, and there was a groove that everybody else had been driving in. Well, I decided I didn't want to drive in the groove, so I got up on the mud and I slammed into the pole. That was dumb.
Have you noticed any changes? I mean, you obviously noticed changes in the creek, but what kind of modern changes, like vegetation, invasive plants, has that really changed in your stretch of the creek here, so that you have seen?
Well, the only vegetation I've seen that's changed is we got a climbing leaf, that a vine that goes up in the trees, and then if the trees are old, and the more it grows, the more weight it creates, and it breaks the limbs. So we cut it, we break it off. I don't think it's a native plant.
Right. Well, any other invasive plants that you've noticed?
Oh yeah, bamboo. People would grow bamboo, and they think it protects their property. The only thing bamboo does is changes the course of the creek by the people that grow the bamboo. Now the water is being pushed across the channel into the other people, and then it's eroding, and it's like a battle.
Mm-hmm. Do you have that situation in your stretch of the creek?
We used to, but not anymore.
Good.
It was taken out.
What's your creek bank composition? Is it trees? Are there rocks?
I have one tree, and then we have, years ago we were allowed to put, by the Corps Army engineers, we were allowed to put concrete foundations. And so we went in and dug down this hard rock and then stacked it in and layered it back so it would protect the bank. What, dear?
But now they don't allow it.
Now there's,
Is it still there, though, the concrete
Oh, yeah.
blocks that you put in?
Concrete's still there.
So you haven't lost any bank?
Not this year. Last year I had, because of our situation with our swimming pool, it's in the part of the creek, so we accept that. If the motor floods, normally, the motor that runs the swimming pool, I've had that flood, and then I dig it out, and then I have to go out and have it rebuilt, and that's $700. So what you're supposed to think that Mother Nature is going to trap you this year, and you're supposed to take the pump out. Sometimes we forget it. Sometimes we say, well, like now, we say, well, there's not much rain. But, in a week we could get enough rain because we have more houses and more roadways. The water's not penetrating in the ground, so it's running off. And so that's where the problem arises. So what we do is we take the pump out. And so that's a safety thing. But our swimming pool is built in an old creek bed. And we have no control over the water that comes out of the creek. If our pool floods, that's our problem. Where we were hurt by the water coming down the driveway.
So that was your worst incident?
That was our worst enemy. Yeah, our worst enemy. Yep.
The one that you didn't have any control over.
Didn't have no control over it. Yeah, because it just goes to show you how much water came down, and there's no people in that watershed. You know what I mean? There's maybe 1 or 2 houses, but there's not enough to make a big impact. So, except now there's Alhambra Ranch, not Stone Valley, Stone Ridge, but there's another subdivision up there. There was a retention basin on that property, but it's been breached. So part of that watershed dumps into that watershed. And then years ago, there used to be a nice dam up in the Ammons watershed, and when the park took it over, they broke it. And the idea of that was for the, what did I say was it? You told me. No, it wasn't the Corps Army engineers, but it was the soil conservationists put the dam in. And it worked fine. Kept a lot of water up there. The wild animals got to drink out of it, and then they destroyed it. I mean, when they were surveying the Ammon property, doing a study, behind the big barn there's a concrete piece. Well, that used to be a watering trough for the cattle. Now it's flush with the ground. Now it used to be that thing should be about 4 feet down in the ground so the cattle could stand around it and drink from it. Now it's flooded in. That's just a little point.
You mentioned how housing development has affected flooding and the way the water flows through the area. There are 2 proposed developments in the area, one at the Sweat Ranch property and another up here in the hills. Has more?
The Turbinos.
Has the developers or the county or anyone met with the residents and talked about flooding or
No.
how
No.
drainage is going to be affected?
No. I heard that the Sweat Ranch. There's my dad made a comment years ago. A lady came to the house and said, "We want you to sign a petition. We don't want building further out in the valley." And my dad says, "I didn't sign a petition when you moved in, so I'm not going to sign this petition." I feel the same way. If the Sweat Ranch was my ranch, I would like to have the opportunity to develop it. In the same way the Turbinos. They've had that land forever. And now they want to subdivide it, and I believe that they should have the right to do that.
What kind of things what kind of precautions or what kind of measures should be taken though? Do you have a feeling, do you have an opinion about that?
Well, I think the county will do the right thing for that. I really do. I mean, they've talked about putting a pipeline in, like a retention basin, and then letting the water out at a certain time. Sure, it's going to cause problems. The more people build in the valley, that's going to happen. But they got it pretty well curtailed because someplace in the valley it's 1 acre, 5 acre minimum. Some years when we're gone, then they'll probably put a big storm drain down the valley. Who knows? At one time years ago, they talked about flooding this valley. I mean, it's a natural right here. They could put a nice dam here, and then all this would be underwater.
What do you think about groups like Alhambra Valley Creek Coalition? Do you think that they're effective? Are you glad that that?
Oh yeah, I think yes. I believe that it's made people aware. I remember the creek one years ago, and it was nice and healthy to play in. I don't think it would be healthy to play in it now, but I think it's getting that way. I think Igor and his group are doing wonderful things. This stuff doesn't happen overnight, but they're making an impact on it. I mean, at one time they wanted to put a concrete lined ditch, and they were going to start right here on this property. They were going to do a creek. Widen the creek out just like they did in Walnut Creek. And they were going to start it right here.
And what stopped it?
Well, I guess people. We were not aware of it, but a gentleman that worked my dad was retired from the county, and a gentleman worked at the county, and he came out and he said, "This is what they want to do." Well, right away they started fighting it. They would have started right. They had to taken the pool out, all the backyard. The corner of this patio would have been the edge of the right of way. They had taken the bend out. They'd have just made it straight.
Tell me what they would have done to Alhambra Avenue.
Oh yeah, and then that's right. And then when it goes to the creek gets to Alhambra Avenue, there was going to be a 15-foot concrete culvert going down all the way down by Serpas.
So it was a neighborhood or is it a community group that probably stopped that?
Probably.
And the city?
Probably.
People.
Well, it was the people along the Alhambra Avenue probably complained the most because it would have wiped out their business. It would have taken some time.
It was years.
Years and years.
We haven't talked about wildlife along the creek. What sort of animal wildlife have you seen?
What kind of wildlife? We got a lot of deer. There's more deer than You know, I planted some plants out front, and at Navalettes they told me that they were deer-proof. Well, you can see, if you look out in the front, there's some yellow plants, and if you look in the back, that's how tall they are and what they're supposed to be like in the back. In the back, they're 2 foot tall, and in the front, they're the same plants, yellow plants, and they're about 6 inches tall. So the deer love them. But you know, we probably see foxes and
Coyotes.
yeah, there's coyotes here.
Wow.
Yeah, we've seen some coyotes. We had one coyote here that somebody should have wrote a story about him. He was an ugly coyote.
Why don't you tell us about it?
No.
It was just,
You know, I never saw him. Everybody else saw him. You saw him?
yeah, let's go over there.
And I never saw him. My neighbors, we got turkeys. We got a ton of turkeys. We could probably supply everybody with Thanksgiving turkey. We used to have peacocks. Oh, they were a riot. This peacock came from Kim Court. And he would strut on up here every once in a while, and somehow or other a female showed up. And then when he got his business taken care of, he'd go back to Kim Court. But then they ran him out of Kim Court. And they had babies, but I think the hawks and the owls got the babies. But for a while it was quite. And then the peacock would go up at the neighbors and see itself in the bumper, the chrome bumper, and peck at the bumper all the time.
Raccoons.
Yeah, a lot of raccoons.
Has the animal life changed since you were a kid? Have you seen maybe more deer, obviously, but anything unusual when you were kids that you used to do with the, you know how kids are with animals?
No, we never bothered them, but there was probably a lot more of them because there was, we didn't crunch. We've crunched their habitat, and so, we could go in the hills and probably see mountain lion tracks, and whether or not we used to collect rattlesnakes. We used to hunt them down, and we spent a lot of time up on the hill here. There's a rock up there on the hill. We called it Big Rock. And not too long ago, Yvonne and I were coming home, and it looked like somebody tagged our Big Rock. I'm kind of hurt by that because you could go up on Big Rock and sit up there and look all the way out the valley. It's a real nice high spot, and it's on the Chapman property. And I think before I leave this great land, I'd like to go up there and sit on that rock one more time. I can walk up the hills all right, but coming down is a little tough.
You talked to Kathy about the Alhambra water bottling plant. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? That was interesting.
Out on the LaSalle Ranch is the springs for the Alhambra water, the bottling plant, or the Alhambra water. My cousin's grandfather was the keeper of the what do they call them? Charcoal filters. They had these big boxes, and the water would go through that filter, and then it would go by steel line down to the bottling works.
And where was that located?
That was where a kitty corner from the old train depot, where the train sits, now. That was the bottling works. And if you look in the Martinez, the book of the history of Martinez, it shows a picture of the bottling works. It's the Alhambra water bottle. Anyway, if you go up, if you ever get a chance, the Kuziks own the land, and if you ever get a chance to meet those people, and you ask them, you could go up the canyon. You can still see some of the springs, and you can still see the piping that comes out of them. That was on the Silvera. Actually, my cousin's grandfather's name was Silvera. I guess he worked for LaSalle's, and LaSalle's owned the land. Remember, they were the LaSalle hardware store. That was their place.
So who used the water? Who would go down and bottle it? What was the activity like around
I don't know.
You didn't ever do that?
No, I never did
Was
do
it
that.
for town people really to use? Or?
Yeah, it was mineral water. It was bottled. Someplace around here, I got a bottle from that I found of theirs. But yeah, it was bottled water. People sold it just like it was called Alhambra. I think that's where Alhambra water started.
Right.
You know, the bottled Alhambra bottled water. They bought that right.
You also mentioned a pipe or a spigot that where people could just go and fill their
Yeah, on the
bottles.
up the canyon. If you go from up Alhambra Valley Road and you start into the canyon, going towards Pig Farm Hill or the pig farm, there used to be a pipe that came down the edge of the road, and people would go up there and you stick your bottles and you could fill the bottles up. My uncle used to tell me, Uncle Fred used to go out to the Pereira Ranch, and they have a box spring out there, and he would fill his bottles up and then take them to town and sell them.
Did the Pereiras know that?
Yeah, they know that.
What are some of your memories about the weather and the climate events? I know, wasn't it in the 1920s there was a snowstorm? Did your family have
That's
any
too.
record? Not for you, of course.
No,
but
I don't know.
No record of that for your family. Okay,
My family wasn't here in the 20s.
that's true. Yeah.
I mean, they were, but they.
Father wasn't.
I don't know anything of it.
Okay.
I know that when we lived on Mid Hill, we had a snowstorm. Huh.
We're building our house.
When we were building our house on Mid Hill, there was a snowstorm. I remember that. Then one year I was 17 years old, worked out at the Bishop Ranch, and it snowed, and I had to feed the sheep in the snow. That was fun.
So Bishop Ranch at that time wasn't an industrial park.
Pardon me?
It was a working ranch.
Yeah, the Bishop Ranch was a big ranch, yeah. And it went from, it went all the way to Camino Tasajera. And then the Wiedemans bought the land, the hill stuff. Part of the Wiedeman Ranch is still in Alamo. So they're good friends of ours. But yeah, I worked at the Bishop Ranch. I worked in the walnut hulling plant, and also they had 2,000 head of hogs, and I worked in that a little bit. And then they had a couple thousand head of sheep. And then where 680 goes right through the Bishop Ranch, that wasn't a road there then, but it was all orchards and of pears, and they would run the sheep in there and let them graze in there.
That was when you were a teenager that you were.
Yeah.
How did you get from Martinez to that area? What was the roads like? What was
It was just Contra Costa Highway.
Is it pretty much where
Two-
Contra Costa Boulevard is
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
That used
It's
to be
the old
Contra Costa?
road that goes to Danville.
Uh-huh.
It's still there, yeah.
So it's the same road.
Same road. That was a highway.
2 lanes.
Huh?
It was just 2 lanes, though.
Yeah, just 2 lanes.
Paved or how
Paved.
yeah.
No, paved.
How long did it take you about to drive? I assume you drove from
I drove my 40 Ford pickup.
the one in the garage.
Yeah.
From here to there, about how long do you think?
I don't know. Me and my friend George would leave. We'd probably leave at 6 in the morning. Maybe take us, I don't know, 45 minutes, maybe a half hour. You know, at that time, there wasn't much traffic. Gas was cheap. I could fill my 40 Ford pickup up and drive with it all week, back and forth. I got paid $1 an hour. Made more money then, and you know, but we worked at the ranch, and if we got out there early in the morning, we got a nice breakfast, and then we'd have an hour off for lunch, and then if we stayed later, we'd get a nice meal for dinner.
Were any of the ferries running from the waterfront while you lived here? Did you ever use the ferry system at
Yep.
all? Can you tell us a little bit
Used to
about
have to
that?
go across the ferry. There was no bridges.
So every time you went to Benicia?
Well, we had relatives in Napa, and we had relatives in Vallejo, and we'd go down and wait on the dock, and then the ferry be coming, and then we'd drive on and take us across to Benicia, and then you went on your way. When they opened the Benicia Bridge, I was in the service, so I never got to see the Benicia Bridge, but they sent stuff to me to show me what they, But yeah, now Yvonne, she could tell you about going across the ferry at Santa Fe.
You used to go there to see family?
We had family in Gurneyville and Point Reyes. That's where my family's from. And I watched that bridge start from one end, start at the other end, and the two met. And it was amazing to see a bridge start from a complete one end and the other end, and they met, and they worked together, and it worked.
And that's when you were a girl in Richmond?
When I was a girl in Richmond, yeah. And we watched that bridge. We used to go across that ferry boat almost every other weekend to go up to Gurneyville when I was a teenager. And then we had, like I said, we had family in Point Reyes, and we would go up there and visit family, but mainly up to Gurneyville, and we'd have to wait.
Talk louder.
Sometimes we'd wait for hours for a ferry to get across, because on the way home it'd be a busy day, usually in the evening on Sundays. Sometimes we'd have to get all the way there and then turn around and go all the way back around and come across the Martinez Bridge, because it was too much fog and they shut the ferry boat down. You're almost ready. I remember a couple of times you're almost ready to be the next cars that would be going on the ferry, and they'd close the ferry down, and we'd have to all turn around and go back, and then get onto the Carquinez and come back down into Richmond that way, or through San Francisco Bay Bridge, whatever way you wanted to go.
And that took a long time.
It was a long time.
But it's just a way of life. There was no space age, and it was just. If you, my folks talked about, my grandmother had a place, they lived, my great-grandparents had a place up in, they call it Sunny South, it's out of Auburn, way up in the hills. And my great-grandfather lived on a little ranch, and he did a little gold mining, and he'd disappear for a week and come back with a sack of gold, and then they would eat it, and they'd live off that gold until he ran off, and they'd go again, But my mom talked about they had I don't remember what kind of car it was, but it'd take them all day to get there. Then they'd have flats, and they'd have to fix the flats, and then they found out that I get motion sickness. They would. This is probably not good, but it needs to be told how hard it was. I'd get motion sickness, but they didn't know what it was. They had this little pot, and they'd put me out on it, and I'd sit there, and then I'd get back in the car, and that wasn't the problem. And when she went to take me to see Dr. Edmeades, and said, well, every time we go someplace, he gets this sickness, and well, that's car sickness. So then they gave me something for that, and then. Anyway.
What kind of, when you were a teenager or a young adult, what did you do at night? What was did you go down into town, or did you stay out?
Cruise the Main.
Huh?
You used to cruise the Main.
Well, when I was real young, before I drove, we had a lady that was, our telephone was not just pick them up and talk them. Everybody had a certain amount of rings, and it was a party line. And at about 6:30 to 7:30, we'd do our homework, and the lady would plug us all in, and we could talk back and forth. And then if somebody wanted to get in, then she'd pull the plugs, and then we'd have to get off the phone. But later on, one time, I had friends. That would come here, and we'd play ping pong. We had a table out there in the garage, and then friends would come out here and go swimming during the summer. This was more like a focal point. We didn't have to go downtown to go to the municipal pool. They came out here and swam.
So people came to you.
Yeah, my friends.
Oh, about when you were a teenager, you went down to the Winks and all those places.
When I got older and I could drive, then Alhambra Avenue didn't go all the way through. It stopped at right about where Les Schwab is now. That was the end of the street, and there was a it's called Winks now, but it was Alex Burgers, and she was a showgirl at Vegas, and she retired, and she came there and they built Alex Burgers. It was a hamburger joint, and so we went there, and then pretty soon they opened Alhambra Avenue and went all the way through. But we drive downtown, and we, went to football games and basketball games, went to school, and I was involved in 4-H, and I'd go all over the county to different things, drive the little pickup, and then we had a state theater, and we'd go there on Friday, Saturday nights. There was a lot to do. There was really a lot to do. There's, as much as you wanted to. And then most of the kids that lived in the valley, we got together, and we'd go out and do different things, We raced once in a while up and down the highway, but not very often. Mostly out in the fields.
In your cars out in the field?
Yeah, our cars.
I wanted to ask you about the Japanese farmers that lived in the Alhambra Valley or farmed the Alhambra Valley. Can you?
They lived on the Sweat Ranch. Yeah, the Okawachis and there's one family that lives there, Yosh. He still lives there. What I can remember about them, they had a Japanese schoolhouse that was there, and it was out there on the Walter property. That would be the road that goes to the Briones Park.
Three Lakes.
What?
3 Lakes.
3 Lakes Road, yeah. The Townsend property. There's a big the Walters house was in the front, and the schoolhouse, or the Walters built their house where the schoolhouse was. But I never saw it as being a schoolhouse. It was just a building that was there. That's what I was told it was. But there was a lot of Japanese families that lived here in the valley, and they mostly worked for the ranches, for the Sweat Ranch. There was quite a few of them that lived there. And then,
How large was the Sweat Ranch?
pardon me?
How large was the Sweat Ranch at the time?
Well, you guys are going to probably talk to Johnny Plummer, and he can tell you that,
All right, we'll ask you.
because he's the grandson of the. But he was one person that grew up with me, and real nice fellow. Him and his wife, and then there was a lot of the people live here. The Tribinos, John Tribino, he was younger than me. His dad was my 4-H leader in electricity, and let's see who else. The Toriyamas and the Bogers. I mean, not Bogers. The Borbas. There's a lot of people in the valley, and sometimes I see some of them. I go to a lot of class reunions, my class reunions. I run into them, and then every Tuesday, the first Tuesday of every month, a bunch of us that graduate in the 50s, we meet down at Patola's and have lunch, just guys. And we reminisce. I mean, I guess, I've been very fortunate. I grew up here, and I'm still here. And I don't see any reason to move. I guess we could have. One time we thought about going to Petaluma, but I surveyed with my dad on the weekends, and I hated to leave. I'd have to commute back from Petaluma. So we just stuck around here. If I had to do it again, it wouldn't change nothing.
Well, that's a good ending.
Good
note.
ending, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Pardon me?
Is there anything else you'd like to add to the things that you
You can ask me anything you want. I'll try to answer it.
You don't get them to move, I know that.
Well, I think you've been really generous with your stories, and We may have to do a sequel after we do a little bit more homework on some items.
That's fine.
It's so funny though.
We can do more.
It was so funny because he's always said he'd move back here, and he loves this area. And he said he would never move. He just could not get him down to Martinez.
I mean,
I just finally got him to go on a trip, and it was so funny because we have a family reunion every year on my side, on my grandmother's side, and my in-laws were still alive, and they would let me use the house with the pool and that because we got tired of meeting at funerals, so we decided we're going to have a family reunion. So we did, and one year we lost 2 of our main people of our family. There was four heads. There was my godfather, my dad, and my dad's sister, my cousin, and then it was all the offsprings of his family. And when we lost my dad and my cousin, we decided we were going to go to Italy. This one here says, I'm not going to Italy. I'm staying right here in Martinez. And I says, well, do you mind if I go? And he says, nope, you can go. And I says, okay, fine, I'm going to go. So I made my plans I was going to go. Well, in the meantime, one of our cousins, they got a divorce. So there was one place left open. And he asked my son to go. And, of course, my son right away jumped at the opportunity to go because it was only the heads of the family who were going. So then finally he says, well, if Michael's going, that means I'm home by myself. I'm going to go. I said, okay. That's the one time I got him out finally. I got him out of here. We want to wait for 16 days, and we ended up in Italy. So we got him there, and then when we had our 40th wedding anniversary, our children knew that I always wanted to go to Alaska on a cruise, and they gave it to us, so he had to go.
Oh, forced to.
And so that's the extent of his big vacations, because I'm staying in Martinez.
Well, he doesn't want to fix it if it's not broken. Right?
Yeah,
Well,
he
you know,
likes it here.
it's like this. We're very fortunate to have a nice place to live, nice neighborhood. Every Tuesday I meet with a bunch of fellows that are hot rodders, retired guys, and once a year we have a barbecue here. And when they come here, they first thing they notice, they say, "Gee, this is just like a park." Well, my folks built it. My dad built it all. We just maintained it, and it's kind of neat.
You're good stewards.
Yeah, that's what we are. We're a steward. It's the same way with the cars. We're a steward of that too. But yeah, we kind of. I mean, when I went to the John Muir play that they had downtown, and the character that played John Muir, I thanked him very much for allowing me to live on his property. He didn't know what I was talking about. He was just floored. He says, you know, one thing I will tell you, when we built the swimming pool was built on the floor of the old creek. But it had to be filled in with dirt from someplace else. And there was a builder up in the St. Mary's Drive area. They took and hauled the dirt out of there and dumped it around our pool. So that's where the dirt came. The dirt came from someplace else, from Charlie Marietta. He was an old contractor in Martinez, and so that's where the dirt came from. And Ralph Trost, he was a house mover in Concord, and our families, everything built here. And my dad had a brother, had 3 brothers, and he had probably 4 brother-in-laws. And that's how this stuff all got built. Everybody helped. Very, very rarely did you hire anybody, even though my dad would survey for people and they would trade work. And so that's how mostly all this stuff got built. This house would have been just a common, ordinary house, but the gentleman that lived across the street name was Sid Lapham. And when he saw what kind of house my dad was going to build, he says, "No way." Well, this house is the type of this house is something you would see in the Brentwood area of San Francisco. There's not another house like this in the valley that looks like this house. It was very modern before its time.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Sharing your stories with us.
Yeah. that's great.
I hope that was
Yeah.
enough to tell you about the creek. I don't know if we gave you much, but
Oh,
we
you
gave you
gave
a lot
us
of
quite a
history.
bit.
Oh, lots.
Yeah.
That creek has been a lot of fun, though. The kids, it's so amazing because even when my family was having family reunion, somebody put a rope on. We were out here having a family. Next thing I know, they're swinging out onto the creek. Not going into it because there was no water, but they were swinging out and having a ball. And it's so funny because now my son has a place out here, and he has the creek, and he put a rope up for his son to swing out and come back.
But my grandson thinks he hasn't tried it yet.
Well, he tried it the other
Oh,
day.
did he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he did. He says it's fun. He tried. So I mean, it's just like tradition is going
Yeah,
back to the
that's
old
good.
way. Down looking at the creek, looking for bugs. Of course, he's down looking for bugs and frogs and whatnot, down there. And he's having a ball down there by the creek. He just
And then surveying around we did a lot of surveying in Alhambra Valley, and one time we surveyed the LaSalle Ranch, and we had to do some work in the creek. We had to locate the top of the bank and the toe of the slope, and then across, and then the other side. Well, when I walk through the creek, I'm looking everywhere. I look for bottles. I've found a lot of bottles, but I found a part of a rifle that was really had maybe been lost, or I don't know, but it was pretty crusted. And so you find that's a little bit of history, and we've surveyed other places around the valley, and we find old bottles, and I still have some of them. I found, like I was telling you, the dirt from the swimming pool. I found I was doing some excavating a while back with a shovel, and I found a cast iron fire truck. And so I have it in my case, and so when we're done, I'll show it to you.
But it's
So I'm like Christopher Columbus. When I surveyed with my dad, I didn't want to run the gun. I was the type of person that didn't want to be behind it. I wanted to be out and ahead and doing all the track work and pounding the stakes and looking for things. I was always that way. Cut. Side of this ridge, there's something we knew about little girl's grave. A little girl had died from diphtheria, and they buried her up there. And for many years, the Alhambra Valley 4-H, we used to clean the gravesite, and we used to freshen up the picket fence around it.
It was just the one grave. Just the one grave.
yeah.
Just one grave. And so I always thought that it's up there by Big Rock, as I remember, but somebody told me, I thought it was up in front of a big oak tree that's still there, but somebody else told me that it was further down and that somebody built a house on it.
Oh, gee.
So I don't know.
I know people come by and see John Muir's grave and they're very upset with it because he's got this little plot and this guy called Strenzel's got the big one. You know what Jimmy tells him? Oh, it's terrible. He tells people, he says, well, he's only a guest. And they look at him and say, what do you mean he's a guest? He's John Muir. And he says, well, he's only a guest because that's the Strenzel's, it's the Strenzel cemetery. And you know the guy that was talking about, Joe Figueredo over here? He hated John Muir.
Oh, my.
Oh, he hated John
Really?
Muir. Yes, when Jim was a kid.
I don't know if the Jones will tell you about that, but this is
The
something.
Joneses would be good.
Yeah,
When you
yeah.
ask about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
we
they
talked
said
about
that he
Joe
didn't like
Figueredo
John.
told me once that
The bum.
he
Never
was a
stayed home
bum.
and took
He
care of
was
his
a
wife.
modern day hippie.
Modern day.